So following along with our Padati, we have persons who have great unprecedented attachment to Guru, devotees, Vrindavan, process of surrender, Gayatri Mantra's holy name. Yes, and they were given up the pride of being a very good person or the pride of being a bad person. They just see themselves as Krishna's secret agent, as Krishna's servant. And they see Mahaprabhu as Krishna and Guru as Krishna's good friend. And they're also very what? Patient. How long are they patient for? Life after life. Following Rupa, Sanatan, and Swarup Damodar. And having awakened some idea, some beginning impression of their specific relationship with Krishna or wanting to do so. And with that, dealing with deeper levels of pride. First, the pride of speech, which without looking at the flip chart is compared to, without looking at the flip chart, a prostitute and a tigress, and even attachment to Narayana, Lakshmipati. And how does one conquer the prostitute and the tigress of the pride of speech? By having a, what do you have to have? A jewel. You've got to have a jewel. And what's this jewel? It's a jewel of speech that is what? Especially what? Beneficial. It's service. That one's speech is following the service mood of Radha and Krishna. Krishna is always trying to please Radharani. Radharani is always trying to please Krishna. So our speech should be in this mood of being beneficial. And we have this jewel of speech following the service attitude of the divine couple. Then we're not going to be enchanted by the prostitute or the tigress or even Lakshmipati. All right, so now we're speaking properly. But now we have to worry about what we're doing. We have the pride of action, hypocrisy. And that's compared to what? Without looking at the flip chart, that's compared to thieves, highway robbers on the shining path of bhakti. All right? And who are these thieves? Lust and greed, yes. And whose lust and greed and anger? Our own. How amazing. Imagine that. Hey, would you please steal my car from me at the robot? You know. I guess for an insurance scam or something. So, we're hiring the thieves. And what do they have us? How are they controlling us? Ropes. Where are the ropes? Around our neck like a dog, right? Inducing us to do things that we don't even want to do. And how do we get rid of these thieves? Huh? Hang around devotees. Not just hang around them, but what do we do when we're hanging around them? Help! Help me, I'm being killed. And what kind of devotees? Those who are free of hypocrisy, which he explains as devotees of the killer of Baka. All right, so at this point, we're pretty pucka, right? Like, we're definitely now a devotee in good standing in the Hare Krishna movement. Like, for sure. Our speech is pucka, our actions are pucka. Now, I have had quite a number of people argue with me that we really don't need to go past this point. This is it. Hare Krishna. But it's not. So Radhanath Das Goswami is now going to go to two deeper levels of pride. My own personal conviction is that this line right here is one of the main reasons why religious people in the world are often criticized. Any of these lines. They speak nonsense, they privately do nonsense, or they haven't done the purification of the mind and the heart. They're just superficial. So here is the pride of what we want. And the only thing I feel sorry about is that we're going to have a 2-day break, because these 2 verses are the heaviest verses in the Manah Siksa, and the real sweet stuff is not going to be until Monday. So you're going to have to kind of be sitting with this over the weekend. So I feel a little sad about that, but anyway, what to do? So this is when apparently we're doing the right thing. Apparently what we're doing is service. But it's not really. Now you remember in the first verse of the Manah Siksa, how did Radhanath Das Goswami talk to his mind? Do you remember? My dear brother, sweet words, holding your feet. All right, well, as we say, he's taking the gloves off now. He's getting out the stick and the shoes. All right, so if we can sing this all together. Are cheta prodyat kapata kutinati bharakara ksharan mutresnat vadahasi katam atmanamabhimam sada tvam gandharva giridhara pada prema vilasat Sudambo dausnat vatvam api nitara mamcha sukaya. O ruffian mind, why do you burn yourself and me, the soul, by bathing in the trickling urine of the great donkey of full-blown hypocrisy and duplicity? Instead, you should always bathe in the ocean of love emanating from the lotus feet of Sri Sri Gandharvika Giridhari, thereby delighting yourself and me. Woo! So this is about when we're deceiving ourselves. If we're secretly doing things we shouldn't, we may be deceiving others. But here, the person we're deceiving is ourselves. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, on the gross platform, the thieves are all dead. Here they are lying dead by the shining path. And we're thinking, woohoo! I have attachment to Guru and the holy name and the holy places, and I see myself as Krishna's servant, and I'm patient life after life, and I'm following Srot Damodar, and I have this jewel of speech and service, and I'm being protected by the devotees of the killer of Baka, and everything I do is Paka, and I'm getting clean. And Radhanath Das Goswami says, you better look up and see what your shower head is. Maybe it's the rear end of a very big donkey. Now, how do we know that we're bathing in donkey urine? It burns. Arjuna was in this situation at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. He said, I'm doing the right thing. I'm caring about my elders, like Dronacharya and Bhishma. I'm even caring about the avaricious members of my family, like Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. They may be greedy, but I'm not. I'm detached even from heavenly opulence. I care about the women whose menfolk are going to be killed in the battle and thereby going to become polluted. I care about the family. I care about all these things. I'm full of compassion. Why am I burning? Yes, Arjuna says, my skin is burning. Why am I feeling a burning sensation? Why am I drying up? If I'm doing the right thing, why don't I feel happy? Why don't I feel peaceful? Why don't I feel content? What's wrong with me inside? I seem to be doing the right thing. So this is the symptom. Now, even then, we can fail to see it, because we can characterize this burning sensation as some sort of dedication. I have heard more devotees than I care to count think that you need Rajagun in order to be fired up in bhakti. And I'm like, are we reading the same books? First of all, they think the greatest determination is in Rajagun, which is really interesting because Krishna says the greatest determination is in Sattvagun. And second of all, they think they need Rajas in order to go out and whatever, distribute books or build temples or... And so they may identify this burning sensation as some sort of impetus, as some sort of dedication. So not only can one misidentify what one's doing, one can even misidentify the symptoms that one is basically diseased. Does this make sense? By the way, I don't know if you all know this, but oftentimes, if someone's been chronically ill for a very long time, right before they die, they may appear to rally. They may appear to get some extra energy. And those who are accustomed to working with people who are dying, hospice workers, then they know, oh, this person's about to die. But the relatives, the family, even the person may think, oh, they're getting better. And so we may even misidentify the symptoms. Amazing, huh? So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur identifies 3 categories of devotees, and he talks about how I think each of these categories can be bathing in donkey urine. Now, I would just like to say that my own personal conviction is that I don't believe these 3 categories are absolute. In other words, the donkey urine baths of one category might also apply to other categories. That Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is not saying only these categories of devotees have this kind of donkey urine, but that this kind of donkey urine bath is more common in this type of devotee. So the first type he identifies is the Swanista Sadhaka. So these are householders who are full-time working like in a temple or for the mission. They don't have a job or a business. So we have shown, metaphorically, we've shown that Radha Krishna are supplying their necessities directly. You see that sometimes it's hard to try to convey this, in a picture. So he says they can bathe in donkey urine by wanting sense gratification on the pretext of offering food to the Lord. So instead of, with bhakti, they're offering with kama. But they're thinking, I'm offering food to the Lord. Serving rich materialists instead of humble Vaishnavas. So this particular donkey urine bath can be institutionalized. So at one point I got some money from my mother and I decided that I was going to make a donation to the Goshala in Mayapur. And I actually asked them, it's really funny, I said, please have this be anonymous. What they did was they put my name on the plaque, they just left the amount blank. I wanted the amount up with my name blank, but anyway, whatever. So the first time I went to visit there after giving that, they had this big greeting party for me. Garlands and Mahaprasadam and Kirtan from the Goshal group. And I said, look, that was a one-time thing. I don't have any more. The next time I came again, garlands and Mahaprasadam and Kirtan. And again I said, look, that's over. That was just a one-off thing. And the next time I came, I was a nobody. There's a very nice gentleman, he passed away, Peter Burwash, who met Prabhupada many times. He was a very famous tennis player in Canada, wrote a number of books. He never took initiation because he asked Prabhupada, he said, I'm so busy I can't chant more than 8 rounds a day. Can you initiate me with 8? And Prabhupada said no. Prabhupada also told him to preach about vegetarianism, which is kind of a little aside, which is interesting. Anyway, he was a very, very famous person, very famous, very wealthy. And but not necessarily the kind of famous person that everybody would recognize. Do you follow? Like his face wasn't that recognizable. So he would regularly visit ISKCON temples and see how he would be received. And when the devotees just thought, oh, he's just some guest, they would generally ignore him. He would also have one of his daughters call temples and see how she was received on the phone, and then he would make a yearly report to the temples. You know, just some ordinary person calling. There's one other gentleman I know, he works now with ISKCON News, and he doesn't advertise his name because he's, in addition to being a Hare Krishna devotee, he's a Franciscan monk and very, very famous in the Roman Catholic community. So he's authored many books. When he speaks, he regularly draws a crowd of 100,000 people. So he's kind of a closet Hare Krishna devotee. But he said that when he first started visiting temples, that nobody ever said hello to him. He was completely ignored. And he said the 5th time he visited a temple, he said it was in Alachua. He stayed overnight at the temple and went to Mangal Artik. And again, nobody greeted him, nothing. And just as he was deciding, he said, I guess this movement is not for me. You know, I thought that I wanted to take up Krishna consciousness, but I guess kind of forget it. And he was walking to leave the temple room, and then he said, my god sister Nanda, he said she crossed the gender divide. She went from the ladies' side up to him, and she said, can I help you? So we often think like that. I mean, obviously people who are rich and famous expect a special kind of treatment. And if they don't get a little special treatment, they'll actually be offended. I get that. But that doesn't mean that we should be ignoring the humble, simple devotees. So this concept, and we do this for service. Well, the rich, famous people, they're going to give a big donation. They're going to be effective in preaching. So we have to give them special attention. Fine, yes. But then when we're ignoring why do I have to care about everybody else? They don't have any money to give. They don't have any fame to give. Who's going to bother with them? Wanting to accumulate wealth and opulence. So this does particularly apply to the Swanista devotee. So if some householder is just working for the mission, obviously they have to be maintained, but they shouldn't be developing wealth and opulence. They're situated wrongly. And if that's their mentality, then it's a kind of donkey urine. And we do see this. Yes, do we see this? People who are dependent on the society who end up accumulating a huge amount of wealth and opulence. Engaging in twisted logic instead of spiritual knowledge. We definitely run into this. Let me just say whatever I want to win the argument. Just the other day, one devotee sent me a link to an article criticizing the Hare Krishna movement, and written by a devotee. And I'd say 99.9% of the stuff in that article was just complete, utter rubbish. I told my friend this. He said, is it accurate? And I said, no. And then he didn't believe me. I don't know why he asked me. And so I actually had a scholar look at it. And I said, if the scholar says it's bona fide, then the scholar said, this is all nonsense. He said, but this sounds like somebody who's trying to sound very educated and sound very reasonable and sound authoritative. But what they're saying is rubbish. And there were no citations anywhere in the article. It was basically an article criticizing Christianity and then saying that these things about Christianity that weren't even true had been brought into the movement in ways that weren't even true. And therefore we should reject the Hare Krishna movement. But nothing was true. The premises were not true, the conclusions. It was full of logical fallacies. But if you weren't familiar with the history of Christianity, if you weren't familiar with the early history of ISKCON, and if you didn't study logic, you would read this and go, oh, wow, he really knows what he's talking about. This kind of thing is extremely common, especially in the age of the internet, when anybody can publish anything. Now, this we don't see as much in our Hare Krishna movement today. It used to be quite common in the 70s and the 80s. It's still rather popular in some parts of the world. So dressing as a renunciate for prestige. So we definitely had a time starting in the 70s when, everybody has to be a renunciate, and then you're going to get more prestige. And people artificially took up the dress of a brahmachari or a sannyasi in order to get more respect in the society. We still find places where people are encouraged, just stay in the brahmachari ashram as long as possible, whatever you do, just don't get married. And the person is actually suited for marriage. And so when they hit like 45, 50 years old, they have some kind of scandalous entrance into the grihastha ashram, right? You've all seen this? And then he talks about the parinista sadhaka. So these are householders who have jobs and businesses in the world. So we've shown this symbolically that Radha and Krishna are maintaining through the man's briefcase. Again, please, whatever, we're just trying to have some pictorial representation. So these people can bathe in donkey urine when they pretend to be very strict and they're privately attached to all kinds of mundane things. This one is very interesting. Preferring the company of non-devotees. So we've shown this symbolically. Right, here we have our devotee who's just being ignored. Right? And here's our donkey urine couple. A couple that's bathing in donkey urine. And here's a jnani, and here's a yogi, and here are karmis. So here we have our parinista sadhakas, and they're preferring the association of jnanis, yogis, and karmis to that of the devotees. And this is, again, something that I run into. It's not that we can't get an education or we can't read books that are practical in leadership or education or psychology. Jai Shishi Radhanath, Jai Gauranga Mahaprabhu, Jai Giri Govardhan. But if we prefer that, if we're like, I'd rather watch mundane movies than read the Bhagavatam. I'd rather hang out with non-devotees than devotees. I'd rather read books on leadership than read the Bhagavad Gita. If we're actually have this, but we're doing it in service. Well, I'm reading these things for service. I'm watching these things for service. I'm doing these things for service. I've already read the Bhagavatam so many times. Let me now do this for service. Again, I'm not saying we can't use these things for service. Just like we have this Jnana Karma Anavratam. Don't cover your bhakti with Jnana, Karma, and Yoga. It's not that we can't use Jnana, Karma, and Yoga, but if they start to cover our bhakti, we start to prefer them. People who start to teach that, the real process of bhakti, you have to perform all these things from Astanga Yoga. Or you have to perform all these Jnana Yoga techniques. Or you have to be a pious person in the world, or else you can't do bhakti. Now we have the Nirapeksha Sadhaka. These are the brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. Thinking, because I am a renunciate, therefore I am an advanced devotee. And again, this ends up being institutionalized into the renunciates or the more advanced devotees, which is just not true. You can be an advanced devotee in any ashram, in any varna, whatever. Advancement in bhakti is not dependent upon externals. Just like who was more advanced, Ramananda Roy or, what's his name? Ramchandra Puri. Who was a more advanced devotee? It's not just the externals, but thinking like that. Like I was working with this, you have such a nice Vanaprastha group here. It's not that, well, now that I'm a Vanaprastha, I'm so much more advanced in bhakti. Not like that. This what we definitely saw in the 70s in ISKCON and to some, and also in the 80s. And it's still, the remnants of this are still existing in ISKCON, where the renunciates mistreat the householders. Thinking they're superior and actually mistreating them. So we've definitely gone through this. We still have remnants of this in our movement, the way children have been treated, the way women have been treated, the way married men have been treated. And there's still parts of it there, especially in certain areas, in certain temples, in certain, you'll find that the women, children, married men are not really treated very nicely. I mean, when we lived in the New York Temple in 1975, Gopal Krishna Maharaj was at that time a grihasta. He was married with a 2-year-old son. And the devotees there, they never would allow him to give class. And the brahmacharis, they would actually spit at the married men and the women. And they were giving, really, seriously, and they were giving Bhagavatam classes about how all the grihastas were dogs, and if you had children, you were really a dog. And it was just like, And then Gopal Krishna at that time worked in an advertising company, and he was the accounts he managed were Pepsi Cola and Clairol hair dye. So, the brahmacharis really thought he was in Maya. And then the head of Spiritual Sky, Karandar, left the movement. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who was in India, we only had one GBC in India. He was in India as the GBC for all of India. He convinced Prabhupada to let him come back to America and take out the bus parties, where he would go in buses that were converted into temples and taking out men to do book distribution. So we had no GBC for India and no head of Spiritual Sky, and Prabhupada wrote a letter. He said Gopal Krishna is certainly qualified to either head Spiritual Sky or be GBC of India, but I don't want him to give up his job. And that was so shocking to the devotees that Prabhupada prioritized him working at, doing advertisement for Pepsi Cola over being the GBC of India. And after that, they started letting him give class. Of course, Prabhupada did end up making him GBC of India. He really couldn't find anyone else that he felt was qualified. And so Prabhupada eventually did say, okay, yes, go be GBC of India. And unfortunately, his wife refused to go to India. She said, I'm not going to live in India. So he kept an apartment for her for like 2 years, and finally he took sannyas. But anyway, this kind of mood was prevalent in our movement at a certain point. And as I say, the effects of it are still felt. What? Who did? Oh, the Gaudiya Math. Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Yes, the Gaudiya Math did treat Prabhupada that way. Prabhupada talked about that, how when he was a grihasta, that the sannyasis and brahmacharis living in the temple, that they didn't treat him like he was really one of them. They treated him more like an outsider. He was paying for the temple, yes. Can we get the mic? So otherwise I have to repeat everything, so it's easier if we just have you talk into the mic.
So Prabhupada's godbrother said, I'm going to tell you something that your spiritual master will probably never tell you. He said, as a householder, he almost single-handedly supported this temple. Not gave a donation, but more or less single-handedly supported it. And Prabhupada never mentioned that. He didn't write them and say, hey, I sent you money you need. He did ask for help, but he never said, hey, how much money did I give you guys? At least I should get 20% of that back. Never.
Right. And Prabhupada, I wrote in one letter, he said, all I got was compression, depression, and repression. He said, but still I was never discouraged. And there was that time meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, right, where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, yes, he will do what is necessary later on. Actually, I'm just thinking about King Rahugana, when King Rahugana was disrespectful to Jadabharata, because he was thinking, Jadabharata was acting like he was deaf, dumb, and blind, and he had a dirty Brahmin's thread on, he wasn't well kept. He was a homeless person, and he really looked like a homeless person. And he looked like he wasn't quite there, And so Maharaj Rahugana had him engaged in carrying the palanquin. And then, when Jadabharata wasn't stepping on the ants, so he was carrying it shakily, because he was more concerned about the ants than the king. He really didn't care so much, And then Rahugana started insulting him. Very sarcastically, oh, I see you're just some old weakling. Right? And then I don't know why, but somehow or other Jadabharata decided to speak for the first time in his life. And he started instructing the king. And then the king got very frightened. And he said, the great saintly persons may be in disguise. They may be in disguise like small children. Nobody thought Prahlad was a great devotee. They may be in so many disguises we may not recognize them. So this is a kind of donkey. You're proud of your position, and you mistreat others that you don't think are as elevated as you in status. Collecting more food and money than required. So this is a problem for anybody, but particularly for renunciates. So again, this may be done in the name of service. I have to have all this for my service. This happens in every religion. Preaching with the idea just of attracting the opposite sex. What's your favorite one? Yeah. I remember being in a kirtan where this one sannyasi was playing mridanga, and he kept looking over at the lady's side, and I'm like, are you trying to check out whether or not we're checking you out as a great mridanga player? And anyway, he later on ended up having a fall down. So this is quite common, that in the name of preaching, right, well, who's going to take care of all these beautiful young girls? I've got to help them in Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. This we've tried to show kind of symbolically. So this is, instead of caring for one's sadhana, one befriends materialistic persons hoping for wealth. So again, we've shown this kind of symbolically, like the curtain on the altar is broken, and the shastra and the beads are on the floor, and this renunciate is trying to get wealth from materialistic persons. This can also be institutionalized. Okay, everybody, we need you to collect money to build the new temple. So, if you can't go to Bhagavatam class and you don't have time to chant your rounds, that's okay, because it's more important to go and collect the funds. Yeah? Have we run into this kind of thing? Right? You can neglect your spiritual life for the sake of collecting money. And that's a higher service, Prabhu. I don't have any time to read. That's all right. You're collecting money. Meditating on materialistic things while apparently engaged in service. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. How much money is in my bank account? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. That's a very pretty girl. This we also see, again, we've shown it symbolically that, the altar's not maintained and the beads and the books are on the floor. That's not literally what it's talking about here. And this renunciate is more concerned with dress. In other words, more concerned with externals. This is what Srila Rupa Goswami talks about with one of the kinds of niyamagraha. Do I look good? Am I following everything externally? But they're actually neglecting their inner development. They're neglecting their inner sadhana. They're just following superficially and thinking, well, okay, I'm really pukka. Now this one, I've gotten people argue with me about this one. So first I'd like to ask you all, what do you think is in this box? We have a locked box there. Anyone have any idea what's in that box? One of the downsides of having a little TV screen instead of a big screen. But I'm very happy for the little TV screen, so we have a clear picture. Love, yes, it's their hearts. I've had some people think they're cookies. Because they do sort of look like cookies. And here we have these renunciates, and this could apply again to anybody. They're really enthusiastic in their service, but they've locked up their hearts. These are people who are so terrified of being a sahajiya that they don't do devotional service. They're just doing service. It was actually here in South Africa. Wasn't this temple? Wasn't this temple? Devotee isn't in South Africa anymore, but he's a South African devotee. I saw him not too long ago. I won't discuss this. That when I was teaching this in 2016 in South Africa, he came up to me and he said, but aren't we supposed to just be philosophical and not be emotional? And I said, I don't know, Prabhu, what about the devotion in devotional service? We have to be involving our emotions. I just gave a class in Cape Town They're doing the Snanyatra, they're preparing for Rath Yatra. And I found a class from Srila Prabhupada. Sachinanda Maharaj had talked about this. I actually found the class where Prabhupada said twice that Rath Yatra is a feeling festival. He used that word twice, that it's a feeling festival. We want to actually develop attachment for Krishna. We want to have feelings in relation to Krishna. We want to have devotion for Krishna. But someone can think, oh, I'm a sober person. I'm not going to have any feelings. All right, now what are we going to do about this? This is very difficult to deal with because all of these are disguised to ourselves as bhakti. Our mind is deceiving us. And therefore, if we ask our mind, and I've had people say this to me, well, I'm just going to be really introspective. And I'm going to just introspect as to where am I bathing in donkey urine. Guess what? You won't find it. Your mind is disguising it. And we'll notice that Radhanath Das Goswami doesn't say here to go to other devotees. Again, my practical experience is that rarely, sometimes, but it rarely works. Because these are deep-seated deceits. If someone else tells us them, sometimes other people can see them. I may be able to see sometimes, this person's motives are off. Like with that article I read, that was actually quite obvious. But I would be very surprised if I wrote to that devotee directly and said that, if that person would be receptive. Years ago, I had one devotee say to me, Urmila, what's my biggest problem? And I said, I don't think you have any problems. And she kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And then because I'm, at least a good portion of the time, very foolish, I said, well, I don't think you have any big problems, but you have a little problem. If this is a little problem. It actually was a problem that was so glaring that anybody who had anything to do with this person could see it. And just objectively, you could look at her life and see that this was her problem. And she had a complete meltdown. She didn't leave me alone for 3 weeks, emails and texts and phone calls, and anytime she'd see me, how dare you say this is a problem? So, going to other devotees is not usually going to solve this. A, they may not be able to see it, and B, we will not believe them, because we already have defenses around this. So what are we going to do? Radhanath Das Goswami says to bathe in the ocean of love at the lotus feet of Shri Gandharvika and Giridhari. Go directly to the Lord. Well, this is a close-up of our painting. All right, so what's our metaphor here? What's the metaphor here? Donkey urine, a bath in burning donkey urine. He says from a big donkey. That's a very big donkey. Copious. We don't have any kids here today. This is usually the favorite one for the kids, especially little boys. All right, so what he says, we should bathe in the ocean of love at the feet of the divine couple. By the way, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, as I mentioned, he has a song commentary for each of these verses. And I don't have the book with me, but in the song commentary, he says that we're charmed. We're actually charmed by this behavior, that we're identifying as bhakti, but actually it's something else. So how are we going to do this? What's going to be our methodology for bathing in this ocean of love? If we analyze the Bhagavad Gita, because I started out with talking about that, right? Where Arjuna says, I'm doing everything right, but I'm burning, I'm drying up. What's going on? So first thing he does is he approaches Krishna. Krishna, I want to be your disciple. So first thing, we actually go to the Lord and we say, I don't know why I'm burning. I think I'm doing everything right. I look at my life and obviously there's some little things I'm doing wrong here and there, but overall, I really think I'm doing things right. And I just don't know why I'm not experiencing this peace and joy internally. Why am I burning? Help me. Now, this help me has to be sincere, my dear friends. So I would say, becoming a disciple of the Lord, it's like you've got to say, show me the truth. I'm going to believe what you show me, and I'm going to act on it. Show me the truth, I'm going to believe what you show me, and I'm going to act on it. Like this friend of mine who showed me the article, what do you think of it? I said, I think it's rubbish. And he said, well, I don't believe you. And then I asked him, why did you ask me? He said, you must have asked me because you thought I was qualified to give an opinion. So if we're going to ask the Lord to show us where's our donkey urine that we think is nectar, that we're charmed by it, show me, I'm going to believe you, I'm going to act on it. I have found this is one of the most scary things to do, and when I have asked people, go to Krishna and say, show me the truth about myself, most people go, no, do I have to do that? Then the second thing is that Krishna will show you. Yes, the whole Bhagavad Gita where he shows Arjuna, and he shows him, here's me, and here's Maya, right? Does Krishna show both in the Bhagavad Gita? Here's me, and here's the gunas, here's Maya, here's illusion, here's the divine nature, here's the demoniac nature, here's bhakti, here's the modes of nature. So Krishna is going to show us, here's real devotion, and here's the thing you're doing that you think is devotion. And then Krishna, after doing all that, he says to Arjuna, now you, what? Very end, 18th chapter, very end, 18th chapter. Krishna says, now you, and do liberate and do as you wish. I met one elderly Indian man who told me, I read the Bhagavad Gita every day, and there's one favorite verse of mine, I always follow it, where Krishna said, do whatever you want. So third thing is we have to choose. We have to choose. When Krishna shows us, we are not forced to give up illusion. We are not forced. We have to choose. Now, Krishna can make it very obvious and very compelling. Do you want ice cream or a punch in the nose? He can make a very good case, but we still have to choose. Then after we choose, then Krishna removes the Maya. Instantly. Now, we don't want to do this because we have had experience that facing our inner garbage is painful. It's painful because we have pride. And I want to think, I'm not bathing in donkey urine in the name of bhakti. And so when we face it, the process of facing it is very painful because it's hitting at our pride. And so we think getting rid of it is going to be even more painful. We think it's going to be unbearable. And it's not. Because as soon as we actually face it and choose, boom, it's gone. And then we find that we're actually bathing in the ocean of love. All right. Woohoo! Got attraction for Guru, holy name, holy places. The devotees, the mantras. I identify as Krishna's servant, and I'm willing to wait life after life. I'm following Swarup Damodar, Rupa, and Sanatan. I have a jewel of speech and service. I'm protected on the shining path, and the thieves can't carry me away. All my behavior is pakka, and my mind is bathing in an ocean of love. Woo! I must be a devotee. And so here we go to the last level of pride. The pride of the heart. All together. Pratista shadrista swapakaramani me ridinated. Katam sadhu prema spirshati suchir etananumana. Sada tvam sevasva prabhudaita samam tamatulam. Yatatam nishkasya twaritam mihatam veshayati sa. All together. As long as the unchaste, dog-eating woman of desire for prestige dances in my heart, how can the chaste and pure lady of love for Krishna touch it? Therefore, O mind, you should always serve the incomparable, beloved devotee commander of Krishna's army, who will immediately throw out the unchaste woman and establish the pure lady of love in the heart. So here his metaphor is a dead dog. And the dead dog is honor and prestige. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with dead dogs. Dogs die. The problem is when you want to eat the dog. That's the problem. So the desire to eat the dead dog of prestige and honor is represented by a wild, disloyal woman. Why disloyal? If you want to be honored, you're only going to hang out with people who honor you. And as soon as people don't honor you, you're not going to want to have anything to do with them. You see in the background the chaste ladies of love. They refuse sadhu prema. They will not enter this heart. Just like I know sometimes I've gone shopping like in a mall, and I'll see in a shop something I could really use, and as I start to enter, they're playing really obnoxious music, and so I just won't go into the store. So it's like that. These sadhu prema, these chaste ladies of love, they want to enter the heart of someone whose mind is bathing in the ocean of love. But if this wild, disloyal woman is in there eating the dead dog of prestige, they will not enter. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that this woman has a lover. She has a boyfriend, and his name is deceit. Because as soon as we want to be honored, we will not be honest. We will always present ourselves as better than we really are. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also says something extremely heavy here. He says this desire for honor, which we've shown here symbolically as like trophies and awards, it's at the root of all deceit, which we've shown symbolically with masks. And he says that if you don't get out this desire for honor, the other stuff can come back. The donkey urine, the thieves, the prostitute, they can all come back. I actually saw this happen with a godbrother of mine who got very, very advanced in bhakti. I mean, he was glowing, literally. Yeah, I'll just go right ahead and say it. He put himself just 7 centimeters below Srila Prabhupada, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's right here. He was literally glowing. And he put himself only 7 centimeters under Prabhupada. He got bathrooms with gold fixtures. And then at this point in the process, what does a person want to be honored for? For being a good devotee. Bhaktivinoda says the householders want to be honored as being kind, religious, sinless, a devotee of the Lord, knowing spiritual subjects, and very detached. Like I like to brag, oh, when I was a householder, we didn't even have any furniture. And the renunciates, they want to be honored for being renounced. Right? For being spotless, for being a master of the Shastra conclusions, for having a perfect understanding of devotion. I actually heard somebody say this in front of a meeting of devotee and non-devotee scholars. Well, I'm really the only one who knows the science of rasa. And even the non-devotee scholars, I mean, one of them said, maybe other people. And I was sitting there in the audience thinking, oh my God, that's a dead dog. There's this very nice verse that means even to this day, the girl named Stuti, or praise, has never gotten married. The reason is that the sadhus don't want to marry her, and she doesn't want to marry the asadhus. All right, what are we going to do about this? He says that we should serve the generals in Krishna's army. We should serve the generals. They will be able to throw out this desire to be honored as a devotee. And then Krishna will personally cleanse the heart. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes, then the heart will become like a beautiful city, and the chaste ladies of love will enter it. Can we imagine that? Imagine if our heart was completely cleansed of any desire to be honored and was filled with the ladies of love. How happy would we be? So why does this work? It works because we start having the mentality of serving rather than being served. And then we find something really astonishing, that it's far more pleasurable to give honor to others than to receive it. And my dear friends, when we're honored by others for being a great devotee, don't we know that that's not really genuine? Like, we know. We know ourselves. And when someone comes and says, oh, you're this, you're this, you're this, inside we're thinking, nah, really. It's phony. And anything phony, anything inauthentic is not satisfying. But taking pleasure in serving and honoring other devotees, that's authentic. And I keep thinking maybe I should put a slide here of Akura. This is when Gopakumara goes back to home, back to Godhead, and Krishna is accepting him. There's a wonderful statement. Yes, I know, I'm almost done. There's a wonderful statement in Krishna book when Akura is going to Vrindavan. We were just meditating on this at Govardhan with Bhaktivigyan Maharaj. And as he's going there, he's thinking, when I get to Vrindavan, Krishna and Balaram will receive me and they'll say, oh, Uncle Akura. He said, at that time, my whole life will be glorious. And Prabhupada says there that if we're not working to be recognized by Krishna, our whole life is condemned. My conclusion is that the desire to be honored, to be recognized, is not wrong. But I should be looking for that from Krishna, because that's authentic. And what is Krishna honoring me for? Is he going to be honoring for me, oh, thank you for waving so many sticks of incense? He's honoring me just because he loves me. I don't have to do anything. Do you follow? It's like any of you who are parents. We love and respect our children just because they're our children. That's all. It's just that simple. I mean, if they, win great awards and cure cancer or something, we'll be proud of them, but that's not necessary for us. So that honor and recognition from Krishna, it's natural. Actually, Prabhupada says to desire what's natural is not a desire. He says, like if you say, I want to eat, no one will say, what's wrong with you? You want to eat? He said to desire to be what is natural. So for Krishna to say, oh, my dear friend, my dear father, my dear mother, my dear beloved, whatever it is we are to Krishna, for Krishna to recognize that, or my dear uncle Akura, that desire is natural. And when we have that from Krishna, then we're not going to be interested in the false honor of the world. And we get this by pleasing Krishna, by serving the devotees. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about how to serve the great devotees. He said, through their purifying embrace, through their foot dust, through the remnants of their prasadam. This is child Narada eating the remnants of the devotees. Through taking the water from washing their feet. And he said, then the spiritual potency will flow from their heart into our heart, and this dog-eating woman and her boyfriend will go far away. So here's our painting. So what's his metaphor here? Right, an unchaste woman, wild woman, eating a dead dog. Sorry, it's always a little harder to write on the bottom part, unless you squat down on the floor. And his solution is to serve the generals in Krishna's army. Do the generals always have a title and a position? I've met a number of generals in Krishna's army that are basically unknown and unrecognized in their community. Okay, so we have here, we've now gone through all of the levels of pride: pride of speech, pride of body, pride of mind, and the pride of the heart, with the intense, heavy metaphors given by Radhanath Das Goswami. And I took these and I made this into a novel, by the way. I made this into the novel Essence Seekers. So part 4 of Essence Seekers is all about how our hero is encountering actually these different obstacles and how he overcomes each of these with this advice from Radhanath Das Goswami. And here we have the jewel of service and speech, using speech in a way that's beneficial, calling for the help of devotees who are free from hypocrisy, bathing our mind in the ocean of love at the feet of the divine couple, and serving the generals in Krishna's army. When we do this, then we'll find, although it sounds simplistic, but we will find that we can become free of these levels of pride. So on Monday, now free of pride, Radhanath Das Goswami is going to take us through the final steps. So on Monday, we're going to go through the steps of meditation, what one does internally. You know, Srila Rupa Goswami, when he talks about Shilanam, says that's both internal and external. So on Monday, we're going to talk about the internal, and then Tuesday, the external. And that will wrap up our session on Manah Siksa. Any mistakes here are my own. Please excuse those and reject them. Anything good here is coming from Srila Prabhupada, Srila Radhanath Das Goswami, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and certainly not from me. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.